This is going to be a very serious video, much more serious than most videos, maybe even the most serious video I've ever made. This is a video about predators that hijack the gaming hobby to use and exploit other people, specifically women or minors. Roll post. So, this campaign was everyone at the table's first or second to my knowledge. We were all very new to D&D 5th edition and between 17 and 19. I can't hate on the in-game actions too much knowing that everyone grew up and got better over the years, but here goes my worst D&D experience. So, there was DM, host, bard, and rogue. I was playing a cleric and having an absolute blast role-playing and working with my backstory. So were the bard and rogue. The bard was secondary in all of this and just went with the flow. The rogue was your basic edgy rogue, standing in corners without saying anything and getting upset when no NPCs go out of their way to talk to their weird self. He wasn't the problem though. Our host was playing a fighter and a ranger. He was playing two fully leveled PCs while all of us were focusing on RP. He focused on loot and power fantasies. The host made it in his backstory that he had a servant bound to him by honor or some bullshit who followed him everywhere and couldn't disagree. Instead of making a low-level NPC, the DM lets him control a second fully leveled character, a ranger focused on damage. This ranger was not roleplayed at all and in every situation just did whatever the fighter wanted. All loot was split evenly among the characters by DM, so host got 2 times the gold and weapons we got. Obviously, his 2 PCs shared a bank account, so he was able to do far more than we could. I was adamantly opposed to him having 2 PCs as soon as our first combat encounter. He always somehow rolled high on initiative, and I'm pretty sure he was cheating on his rolling app and dealing more damage between his 2 characters than the 3 of us combined. Every encounter where we fought was boring because he did everything. I argued relentlessly that it wasn't fair and ruined the fun. Probably too passionately, but the answer from the DM was, well, why don't you play 2 characters? I'm sure it exists, but to this day I've never met a D&D group where everyone plays 2 PCs. It sounded absurd to me. Now, let me give some insight from the DM. It wasn't uncommon knowledge that I didn't get along with him. We both grew up very religious. A few years prior, I had planned on being a youth pastor after high school. He currently was planning to become a youth pastor, and we disagreed heavily on religion because he was very judgmental of anyone who drank, smoked, or was gay. If he was around and found out someone in the room was drunk or high, he would make a big show of shaming them before leaving. So, host had a younger cousin who lived with his family. She was in 8th grade, and every time her or her friends were around, DM would drop everything and obviously flirt with them. It was so gross and cringy. It was weird and made me embarrassed to be around him, but I'd been in game shops before where every other 25-year-old did the same thing. It's weird and gross, but not worth fighting over unless you see implication of them swapping numbers or something. Okay, full stop. A fully grown adult aggressively hitting on a child isn't weird or cringy, it's predatory behavior. Even if they don't continue to groom the kid or get their number or Snapchat, it's still genuinely evil, and nobody does that with good intentions. If you see it, stop it. I don't care who it is. There is no adult who should be hitting on a minor. Anyways, back to the story. Everyone let it slide because why get the DM angry over him being what we perceived as simple cringe? Oh my gosh, I'm throwing up in my mouth right now. The host didn't care or think anything ill of it since DM was one of his best friends, and one day, while me and another one of my friends were at host's house, the cousin was talking to us and she mentioned that DM was romantically speaking to her friend. He was newly 18 and she was a 14-year-old 8th grader. Absolutely disgusting. They were apparently swapping nudes and dirty talking daily. I wanted to throw up when I found out. Oh, really? The guy who was aggressively hitting on a minor every time she came around turned out to be a pedophile? What? The cousin wouldn't tell host or corroborate the story because of previous trauma that caused her to leave her old parents, and this was her new home. But the friend and I confronted host and told him about DM, saying that we don't want to be friends with a pedophile or a groomer. He thought that we were lying and that we were just out to get DM. All of this happened in between D&D campaign sessions. Now, I'm going to give you all a shot at guessing what happens next. OP just learned that their DM is not only a bad DM who is not worth playing with, but a bad person. He is disgusted and horrified of what he has seen despite all of the warning signs. Does he A. report it to the police, B. take justice into his own hands, or C. continue to play D&D with him as if nothing is currently happening? Well, let's find out. I should have put my foot down, called the police, and left the campaign right then and there. However, I was young and stupid. I thought 14 to 18 was super creepy, it is, but I knew multiple seniors who dated freshmen. That's not normal. The teachers at my school didn't call the police on those seniors, so I let myself be swayed into groupthink and just bit my tongue. Everything on the D&D side of things came to a head after a fatal mistake by DM. He let hosts' PCs buy a store and get passive income. It was a lot of passive income. After a few sessions, he had bought shop after shop after shop. He had this joke where every time the Dark Elf Rogue tried to buy something from a store, he would buy the whole store, and make it so they don't serve Dark Elves. It was funny the first time or two, but eventually it got to bullying. OP goes on for a while about the D&D sessions he played with this guy. I'm omitting it because I value your time, and it ultimately doesn't really matter. It basically boils down to DM bullying a player, OP calling it out, and then not getting invited back. Back to the story. I still can't believe I stupidly bit my tongue about something horrendous like him talking to that girl just for a chance to play D&D. It is truly shameful. They played as a D&D group for about a year. I stayed friends with the bard and the host. Host was a good guy outside of gaming, but he loves power fantasies, so having a DM who let him do whatever he wants brought out his worst side. After that year or so, I heard that they kicked DM out. He had asked Bard's girlfriend to cheat on Bard and sleep with DM. NSFW, after it was clear and long after Host was completely done with DM, his cousin came out to Host and said that DM had once groped her when he thought she was asleep while sleeping over. My friend and I were right, and Host apologized for not believing us. TLDR, DM shows severe favoritism, allowing player to play 2 characters and hoard enough money to make kings jealous. Player makes other player cry by bullying. I get kicked out for calling out the favoritism, and eventually DM gets kicked out for pedophilia, as well as attempting to sleep with a player's girlfriend. End post. I just still can't work it through my head how they would allow a child to go through that because they wanted to play D&D. They let a grown man hit on a minor several times, sexed her, and due to their inaction, she wound up getting groped somewhere she thought she was safe. I read a lot of stories about bad people doing bad things, but this one makes me feel genuinely sick to my stomach based on the fact that OP wasn't even the closest person to the DM. There were definitely several other people who knew way more and also chose to do nothing. So, from what I've collected from this story is that the minor is left with very real sexual abuse trauma and DM gets to walk free to torment another victim. We have 2 more stories, so for whoever is still here, let's go. Roll post. Trigger warning, mentions of rape, torture, and grooming. To give some context before the post, this was in a text-based game where we all put our actions in a group chat as time goes on. Sometimes it was slow, sometimes it was fast. Sit down and grab some snacks, this is a long one. Let me introduce all of these characters before we get into things. Let's give some nicknames to everyone. Our DM, Patrick. An Aarakocra Druid, me. Aasimar Warlock, Brian. Tiefling Sorcerer, Sarah. And finally, the High Elf Bard named Eloxy, Paul. The game started as the party meets in a crowd of citizens in a reasonably sized town. Everyone's staring at a news board that says 3 men and 5 women have gone missing in separate events. The only clue is a jade cube, left at the last known location. RP is initiated as we all introduce each of our characters. Everyone was normal and put a wonderful amount of flavor into their appearance and backstories. Then there was Paul. Think of your typical horny bard stereotype, except he was playing a female character. Made sure to mention several times how she is the most beautiful woman you have ever seen. Okay, whatever, I'm sure he has a good reason. Oh boy, I was wrong. Fast forward a few sessions and we are in a dungeon that is patrolled by minotaurs. By this time, Paul had made everyone aware of how much of a stereotypical bard Elaxi is. I also noticed around this time that Sarah had been acting strange, with her text pattern and vocabulary becoming more reserved. He hadn't done anything too bad until the moment Elaxi was captured by the Minotaurs and thrown into prison. Trigger warning, mention of rape, torture, and grooming after this point. At this time, he tried seducing the Minotaur standing guard outside of his cell and got a nat 20. Patrick started to describe what transpired, saying that the Minotaur got shy and, "I offer my body to him," says Paul. Everyone in the group immediately went on high alert and Sarah left the group chat. Patrick tried to move away and salvage the situation now that Sarah quit mid-session. Paul insisted on the way he wanted to deal with the situation with the subtlety of a giraffe trying to hide in a desert. Paul would always move the topic so that no matter how hard Patrick tries to avert it, Patrick eventually caves and does the usual fade to black, trying to skip the scene. Paul jumped in and started to describe the situation himself. At this time, Sarah had joined the group chat again, saying that she needed to take care of something, and went on to say how the Minotaur had entered the room and claimed Elaxi as his own. Before Patrick had time to ban him, Paul had already posted an NSFW, also NSFL, image of his character being tortured and raped by a Minotaur in graphic detail. This was posted right after Sarah joined the chat, and upon seeing the image, left again. Paul was banned and blocked by all of us as soon as possible. About a week later, Patrick, Brian, and I were put into another chat with Sarah. The first thing she posted there were numerous screenshots of Paul attempting to groom her, and also sent quite a few explicit images of himself. She wants to do more than just block him and leave him at that, because he might try to prey on more vulnerable people than Sarah, so we all hatched a plan. It was led by me. I got an alternate Discord account set up and made a profile that made me seem like I was a girl. A 16-year-old girl to be exact. Sarah was 18. Over the course of the D&D sessions, we had learned quite a bit of info on what servers he was a part of. I joined one of those and sent out some DMs. This is where the fun begins. Not 2 days into this operation, he was already sending me some nasty stuff. I need to go deeper. I gathered 2 weeks worth of messages. These contained grooming behavior, explicit images and videos, IRL and drawn, what city and state he lived in, his real name, and full face photos of himself. At this time, I didn't want to cause any more fuss, so I blocked him without even telling him of this operation. Our group compiled all of these chat logs, images, videos, and pictures into a single file and sent it off to his local police. I haven't heard anything about him since. Paul's Discord profile at the time of this writing says that he was last online 5 months ago, and all of his gaming profiles say the same. I know this post might seem like it's fake because of all of the predictable twists and turns. Even if you think this is fake, please take this message to heart, especially if you are a minor. Only talk where other people you trust will see the messages. Thank you for reading. End post. Okay, well, this one wasn't too bad. Sarah was 18, recognized that he was a dangerous individual to minors, and did what she could to stop that guy. I hope that guy didn't have any other victims that we don't know about, but as far as we know, props to Sarah and company. You did great. Hopefully that guy recognizes exactly how dangerous his behaviors are to other people and himself, and if he had any real victims, that he is in jail. Anyways, we have one more story. So, for the few of you that remain, roll post. I used to be part of a West Marches Discord D&D server months ago. As a reference, West Marches servers are essentially servers that focus on one-shots for one particular setting, allowing the characters the player plays to progress through different one-shots and different DMs. Although the accessibility is a huge plus, allowing for newbies and veterans alike to hang out, being able to adjust for a tight schedule easily, this can make way for plenty of bad people to leech on and not let go. These were one of these times, with the case of Howard, a 22-year-old male. Name replaced for anonymity, of course. Don't worry, the title will make sense later on. Trigger warning for pedophilia, obviously, grooming, mentions of rape, and general creepiness you'd find from any nice guy on the internet. When he first came onto the server, it didn't take long to give off a negative impression, even if he seemed nice at the start. He played an assassin rogue wood elf named Fullred, and some convoluted backstory involving him being drafted as a soldier into war when he was a child. Something happened, I believe something involving a cult that led him to his sister being trapped in some kind of amulet. He had this odd magical version of DID where he would switch to this character called White whenever he got pissed off, going completely feral and threatening to kill people, having even attacked my character when he was taken to the temple and resided in for help. The first time he switched was during roleplay in between games when a drow tavern owner told him off for not respecting other people's boundaries, alongside his need to be mothered by the people around him. Now, I didn't get to the second part, but the first part was very apparent when I scrolled upwards, when he and his raven were invading the personal space of her and her girlfriend. This was the first red flag, especially when he made extremely passive-aggressive, out-of-character comments about her and me, an innocent bystander who just wanted a bento box from the kitchen. However, I gave him the benefit of the doubt, as sometimes I wound up taking in-character things personal at times. I thought this was the case, and technically I was true, but, oh boy, things got worse from there. A server was created about his shenanigans, constantly sharing memes about him and what he did. There's so many stories I could tell, but this story will go on for hours if I talked about them all. As time went on, Howard started to get suspicious. After his in-character girlfriend had to leave the server, Full Red got a crush on literally every girl he met. He made really creepy out-of-character comments regarding other people's female characters, including, but not limited to, calling one of my friend's NPCs the town's next public urinal for having an active sex life, and even made a second character, a female Dhampir named Nicolette. As Nicolette, he constantly stated in character about how she was a girl and a vampire, to the point where that was just the extent of her personality. He also sexualized her quite a bit, to the point where one time he literally listed her breast size when giving a description of her. They were double Ds, of course, because why wouldn't they be? So yeah, very obvious fetish integration on a D&D server full of minors. I started to get more and more suspicious of his behavior towards women in character and out of character, and it spiraled during the PMs of a female character, played by the past friend of mine. She was talking to Full Red about how she was continuously raped as a child, and the first out-of-character comment he made about the reveal was essentially, "Ah, she's not a virgin? Sad face. Oh well, Nicolette can fix that." For context, he associated a broken hymen with losing your virginity, so he believed if you regenerated your hymen that it would be restored. This is very weird, I know. After that, I had a bit of an idea. I wound up leaving the server at that time, due to many reasons that I would rather not say here. Keep in mind though, he was partly the reason, and even though I left, I still cared about the server, and I was legitimately afraid of Howard at this point. I wanted to make sure he wasn't being predatory with any girls on the server, especially underage ones. He was already pretty sexual with a minor already, one of my other friends. He was a guy and clearly uncomfortable with the interaction. But Howard was still persistent when a seemingly normal conversation delved into some sort of odd fantasy of his. One of my friends being a boss of some company and getting his dick sucked under a desk. Though I didn't hear about this until a bit later, so I had a plan to make sure that if he is being predatory, his ass will get booted off the server. I posed as a 16-year-old girl from Nevada by the name of Emily. My character was an Aasimar that looked like a half-elf, as I knew his type by then to be elvish. Due to one of Full Red's magical items being magical angel wings that sprouted out during roleplay when he wanted to act like the epitome of goodness and compassion, I knew he had a fixation for angels. I named her Ela, and she was essentially a cheery and excitable bimbo cheerleader stereotype who liked to garden and sing. Basically, Howard's dream girl. From what I've seen, she was a divine soul sorcerer bard mix. I made Emily's personality similar to Ela's, even being a cheerleader in real life herself. I made absolute sure that no one knew I was pretending to be her, not even my friends. I even swapped the time zones on my phone to replicate Nevada when I sent evidence to the admins. Only my boyfriend knew, and he left the server with me. I changed my typing style to be grammatically pristine and used my emoji button like there's no tomorrow. I was fucking ready no matter how long it took to make sure that this guy wasn't harming little girls. He took the bait immediately after I posted my reference for her. He exclaimed Hila to be so effing hot after seeing her reference photo, leaving a little heart eyes emoji reaction below it. I was legitimately surprised he took it so quickly and took it hard. After a brief run-in with him, my character left because I was getting bored and he was clearly busy. He PM'd me expressing his disappointment about not being able to talk to her, and so they can not be friendos, in a clear flirt, despite the fact that Full Red at the time was engaged. The very first message, and he already tried to joke flirt about our characters. I responded, obviously not feeding his advances to see if he'll proceed further, and he did, with highlights such as, "Ooh woo, private convo with Full Red? Haha, well so, a beautiful cheerleader who is nerdy for D&D and is super smart in classes? Sounds pretty perfect, lol. And nice. Good dreams. Bet I could guess what you were dreaming about, wink emoji." He used the wink emoji a lot during our conversations, by the way, at least 10 times, and we did not talk that often. One of my personal favorites was when I was talking about how Hila basically turned her room into a greenhouse. I was listing off the various flowers she had in there, and he responded with, "Jokingly speaking, if she is in a tiny garden, would she be the primrose too precious to pluck from the garden of beauty? I bet Eve would be jealous had him picked someone else." Lol. This made me personally realize how much Howard took this bait. He didn't just swallow the worm, not even the hook. He swallowed the whole damn fishing line. Of course, this was only towards my character, but I knew that if he was charmed by Hila that easily, Emily would not be much of an exception. I gave him my first sign I was a minor, claiming I was in school so my responsibilities would be sparse. Of course, in online classes due to the pandemic, this did not stop his flirting, as he responded to this reveal by saying, I see, haha. Good girl for being such a good student. Don't let me distract you too much, wink emoji," which really rubbed me the wrong way. Big time. I revealed my grade a bit afterwards alongside my age. Now, the reason I picked Nevada was one thing and one thing only. The legal age there is 16. Of course, that doesn't mean his flirting is any less creepy, and that doesn't mitigate the age of consent laws over Discord and the internet in general, which is 18. However, I had a feeling that the consent laws for Nevada, which I did state were a thing as Emily would prevent him from being scared away, and oh boy, it didn't. In fact, it seemed like it made him even more enticed. I talked about my life, which was of course fabricated to hell and back. He wanted to VC, but I gave the excuse that I was mute, in case he would recognize my voice if I spoke out. He started to get extremely simpy, even more so than what he did with that flower comment. He exclaimed how smart I was, and I asked why. He went on an entire psychoanalytical rant regarding my proper grammar and how I played my character to be purposefully sociable. Which, I mean, he did get it pretty right on the nose. I made Hila an everybody's friend character, a beacon of positive energy as a means of being able to attract his character towards me. In the end, he exclaimed, "Or, TLDR, I can just Sherlock Holmes the crap out of you and I can just tell," with yet another winky emoji. This guy used more winky emojis in those few days than I've ever used in my life. I found that pretty funny considering how I was just pretending to be someone else the entire time. Either way, the next day passed and we talked a bit more. He gave more information about himself, saying that he was 22 years old and training to be a pharmacist, yet still considered himself a doctor despite not having a PhD. I talked about being in Nevada, my school life, being a cheerleader, and how I also wanted to get into the medical field. He mentioned how a sexy nurse's costume or scrubs would be a nice look for Halloween. Keep in mind he knew I was 16 at this point. He showed pictures of his pet, which was about the only thing truly wholesome about our conversations with each other. The cat was actually really cute, and I still smile at photos of it from time to time. At least he's not a cat hater. After some time, I had to take a shower. This gave me the idea to bait him one last time. By, of course, saying I'm taking a shower. And dear Lord, he didn't just swallow the fishing line with that, He swallowed the boat. He said, "Oh, don't tease me like that, baby," with another goddamn wink emoji. I knew this man for 5 days and he has already expressed signs of grooming, from the constant over-complimenting and sexual references, constant, directly sexually flirting, very simp-like behavior both towards Ela and Emily, had a red flag so red it could pierce through the rosiest glasses fucking imaginable. Keep in mind, not only have y'all not seen it all, because again, I'd be here all day, I didn't even flirt with him back. I constantly switched topics, ignored his flirtatious behavior, and tried to be this oblivious little girl that didn't know shit. The only thing I did that reassured him was state that despite being 16, Emily, was still considered a legal adult in Nevada. Not even on Discord or the internet in general. In Nevada. Maybe, just maybe, you could consider the time I referenced sex once as flirting, maybe, but even then, that nowhere near justified the gross behavior he exemplified towards a kid. This was the last straw. At that point, I was legitimately stunned, not just surprised, I was scared, paranoid. It was hard to sleep that night. If he had said all of this to a non-existent girl over the course of 5 days, what about real little girls who were legitimately oblivious to his advances and would have stayed in contact with him for longer, for weeks, months, years? I had to tell the admins. After giving them the evidence, it literally took them minutes to decide to ban him, when otherwise he could have stayed there for many months longer, preying on the minors on the server and manipulating them into doing awful things. And God, I pray, that when I told him off for doing this, still pretending to be Emily one last time, that he had his lesson. If not, then he might be grooming girls to this day. I don't want to give away his Discord tag in case he did learn his lesson, but please, if you see creepy behavior, don't be afraid to call them out on it. Let others know. We can't let people like him get away with shit like this, and Howard, if you're reading this, take the words I have said and use it to better yourself. Don't play the victim card. Your behavior can legitimately traumatize little girls and land you in jail. Plus, if you're planning on being in the medical field, they are very unforgiving towards creepy individuals, especially those who have pedophile-like behavior. Even if you're miraculously not somehow a pedophile, go to therapy and stop being a dick. TLDR, I was suspicious this player on a West Marches had predatory intentions, pretended to be a little girl to bait him, and my suspicions were proven justified by a lot. End post. I'm gonna be honest, this is the one time where I'm legitimately kind of speechless. There's not much I can say that would add to this story, but I will say something very important, especially if you're under the age of 18 watching this. You've probably heard this a million times before, but don't share any of your personal information, and be very careful who you friend and form relationships with on the internet. There is no shortage of creepy adults who are more than willing to take advantage of young people. Unfortunately, keeping minors safe on the internet is incredibly difficult, and no children on the internet go untraumatized right now. So please, just try to stay safe. And if you're a parent, try and keep your kids safe. Anyways, after all that, I could really do with some more light-hearted stories, please. Take it easy on me a little bit. If you have any stories about funnier rage quits, weebs, edgelords, or those other funny, cringy horror stories, I would really appreciate it. I'd like to focus on more lighthearted stories throughout the rest of this month. I'm also looking at doing another series like the Craig or Ross saga, so as many of you know, I have a subreddit at r/CritCrab, but if you value your sanity and don't want to do Reddit, you can just email it to me directly at critcrabsubmissions@gmail.com. I use both of those regularly. See you later.